If you could see the future, would you play the lottery more? I am here with a futurist, and I've only ever met one in my entire life, and I'm fascinated to hear what this man, Mr. Graham Norris, is going to be saying about your future, my future, and our future. Graham, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me, Jessica. Great honor to be here.
Yeah, so our conference, it's an unconference, so everyone's collaborating. So I'm inviting people like you who know stuff about habit shifting that are going to be necessary in our industry. And so I I want to know, like, how does one become a futurist?
A great question. Well, I guess my journey to becoming a futurist, it really started off when I was doing a doctorate. I was studying in China, and I was fascinated by the pace of change. And looking at the future, being a futurist is really understanding change, because if the future was the same as today, then we don't need to worry about it. So it's really looking at how things change. And the pace of change in China was just amazing. People there in a single lifetime go through the amount of change that it takes many generations in the West to have gone through. And so when I was looking at change and adaptability and how these people were adapting to this very high pace of change, it became clear that actually you don't have to wait for the change to happen before you adapt to it. You can actually adapt in anticipation of the change. And so I often give the analogy of a dog crossing the road. So yes, you can have a dog crossing the road and it gets knocked down by a car and it gets back up again. It says, look how resilient I am. I can keep doing this all day, keep getting knocked down by cars.
All day, boys.
That's right. But if the dog can actually see the cars coming, and then it can avoid the cars, and then it can just cross the road safely without the need to be so resilient. And so being able to look into the future a little bit more clearly can really help in helping us in making us better decisions. And that's really what it boils down to. All decisions are about the future. And so the clearer we can look into the future, the better decisions we can make. And I often say that actually we're all a futurist. We all have a futurist within us. And that's really what I talk about, is how to cultivate the inner futurist that we all have.
Ah, I love that. So it's not just a power that you were born with. There's something that we can develop. You were telling me that there's a couple habits that we can develop. So specifically in our industry, you're in the speaking industry, I met you through LinkedIn with adaptability because we measure adaptability. So resilience, grit, mindset, mental flexibility, and 12 others to see if you are adaptable. And if you're not adaptable, you're probably not going to be so great in the future either. So were you more interested in adaptability, or did you realize that to be good in the future, you need to adapt? Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
So I looked at adaptability first. And I would say I was looking at adaptability in response to change, but it became apparent to me there was a lot of value in adapting in anticipation of change. So that's how I approached it.
And is the future bright?
That's a great question. I would say, in general, the more you look at the future, the more that you will be optimistic about it.
Ooh.
And the reason I say that is because if you don't look at the future too much and you wait for it to happen to you, then you're probably going to be a little bit defensive, a little bit more relying on that resilience. Whereas if you look into the future, you can really unlock the uncertainties and the mysteries of the future, and you can take the sting out of that uncertainty. And so that's why I say, in general, the more you look at the future, the more confident you will be after you understand what's going to happen.
Well, I love that because we're afraid of what we don't know. And if we know more about it, we're not as afraid. Simple math, right?
That's right. And I was reading an article yesterday by a very famous psychologist in the United States who was talking about this very thing, is that we spend a lot of mental energy in trying to reduce uncertainty because it is discomforting.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I think I spend too much time thinking, like, what's going to happen to me when I'm 65? And I'm like, okay, that's 25 years away. Like, well, why don't I prepare for it with a pension, with with better health, with going to the gym, like taking some more vitamins, like nurturing my relationships instead of like worrying about how terrible it might be. It's so interesting. It's like just analyzing and seeing what other people at 65 are like, like a little bit of research. We
That's
don't.
right. And then when you look more at that, do you feel more confident that you can
Yeah.
actually deal with the challenges and find the opportunities?
Okay. I like that. Okay. Hmm. So in our industry, I have an inkling that monologue and keynotes are not going to be thriving in the future. Like this lack of interaction that is still really strong in our industry, where someone stands on the stage and like talks for 45 minutes or 25, whatever it may be nowadays. People have such low attention spans. If they're not incredibly engaging, the content is on ChatGPT. Like, how are we going? Like, do we need to do Tony Robbins style to like keep the industry going, or what do you think?
Oh, that's right. If you're not getting the audience to walk across hot coals, then you're not doing it right. You could well be right. I would try not to make sort of predictions about what could happen. So we could see that a lot of the value that people get out of that kind of activity in terms of keynote speaking or those events could be created through AI or some other kinds of platforms. Or we could be heading more towards a direction where that interpersonal contact or the kind of skills that you can, if you need this kind of skills where you're going to be dealing with people, then you need to go and deal with people. You can't get some of those things by dealing with computers or AI. So there's also this other direction that things can move in, and there's no reason why both of these futures can't happen simultaneously. So I think it's important to look at lots of dynamics and lots of things playing out at the same time. What are you seeing? What trends are you experiencing in your world then, Jessica?
I'm just noticing that our industry is full of people plus 40 that are doing a lot of monologuing, and they're successful. And I think, but when I monologue, I notice people drifting off and shooting me out and going to their Tinder. And so I was like, well, that hurts my feelings. So I'm going to be more engaging. I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to like make them turn to their neighbors. I'm going to like make it so that they don't ignore me. And I'm just learning that as like an amateur in this field. So I'm just watching the audience and noticing that they aren't listening to me if I just talk. So I made it incredibly engaging. And I think like, will the future, the younger people, when they start hiring us, the Gen Zs, when they start hiring us, are they going to put up with 20, 30 minutes without any kind of interaction? And I think, no, that the humans will speak for themselves. It's not even about trends. It's just human psychology. And we need to adapt to that and add some of the Tony elements, I think, to it. And I'm not sure if our industry at this age, well, I don't know. I just thought maybe since you do work a lot in that realm, more than I do, maybe, I don't know.
Everybody's experiencing things in different ways because there's all different kinds of events and different kinds of speakers. Indeed, yesterday I was talking at an event, and I saw one of the other speakers there who did it in this slightly more monologue type way, a bit more old school. And some people maybe appreciate that, and this is it. The diversity of the audience is another factor to consider. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it does appear. I've seen some data, but it's hard to see how reliable it is about shortening attention spans.
What?
In a session that I give, because I do talk about the future, and if it's successful, then hopefully I've got people to stop worrying about. At the beginning of the session, everybody's thinking about what's going on in their phones, and if by the end of the session, people realize that there's nothing, that they don't care about what's happening in their phones anymore, because they realize just how inspiring and how important it is to think about the future so they can make great decisions about that, then that's success for me.
That's beautiful. That's really, then you are an inspirational speaker by definition.
I hope so. I do hope to help people realize that they can escape the noise of the present, and there is so much noise, and really do something more productive by thinking just a little bit more long term. I really do try to inch people second by second. If I can get the audience to think even just one more second more deeply into the future, then that's success.
Were you always like one of those kids that were like, when they're 6, they were dreaming about being 9. When they're 9, they were 12. When they're 12, they were 20 and driving a convertible, not convertible where you live. It rains too much. Or I guess you fell into it through adaptability, right?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, you could also say that I'm the alcoholic that sort of teaches other people how not to drink, right? I mean, I know how tough it is to put down the phone, stop looking at stuff on the internet, get lost down these rabbit holes of research or whatever, and actually think, okay, what's coming up next week, next month, next year. Because we spend most of our time thinking about the next few seconds, the ultra short term, and to even think about tomorrow, we normally need to make a deliberate effort to see what's on our calendars and think through what's going to happen. It's just not a natural thing. And I make loads of mistakes making poor decisions because I haven't really thought through the future very well.
So great. I love this. I'd never thought of a futurist as that. I always thought it was kind of like, oh, they must study trends, and they're kind of like anthropologists to some degree, and they study psychology and economics, and maybe you do, and also you bring hope into it. That's really nice, and encourage us to get off our freaking phones. If you're on your phone, get off. Stop listening to us. And so you mentioned something in our pre-chat was about imagination. And I'd love that. How do you, if you want to put hope and inspire us in the future, we need to engage our imagination. Is there a way to do that better that you found that helps your clients?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of habits maybe I can share with you and the listeners or the watchers today. So one, relating quite directly to imagination, is scenario thinking. I talked a little bit about scenarios earlier on, but really scenario thinking, you can have a very complicated, complex way of making scenarios, but you can also have very simple ways of just thinking in terms of scenarios. And so when someone asks you, what do you think is going to happen? Instead of trying to our natural response is to come up with a prediction, a specific forecast about what will happen. Instead, is to come up with a range of possibilities. And you can even assign probabilities to those if you want. But, we talked earlier on about the future of speaking and the future of business meetings and events. How might that go in terms of keynotes or other formats? And so, so you could say, well, maybe we're going to go much deeper into, interactive events, which, have much less sort of teaching, but much more, interactivity. That could be, there's a 40% chance of that. And there's a 30% chance that it's all going to end up in AI and it's going to be robots, and then there's maybe a 25% chance of something else. Yeah. By doing that, you have to exercise your imagination to do, like I say, it's a capacity we have that we don't really use because it's not natural to us. But to consider alternative futures. And for that, we need to use our imagination, stretch our imaginations. And when you first do it, it helps to write things down. But over time, it can become part of your mindset as you make it more of a habit.
It's like putting on virtual reality glasses to your future and like choosing different doors to go through. It's like we don't know which one's going to be the door, but imagining it. It's nice.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely. What's that?
It's almost fun. Like now I'm imagining what it's going to look like. And like they all seem kind of fun. Oh, I like that. And another one you mentioned, imagination and
well, the other habit I was going to share with you was really about experimentation.
Okay.
Because we are in a society now which really emphasizes being right, and this also reflects a natural instinct that we have to be right. We like to be right. It gives us a sense of sort of self-worth and validation, and also when we think about the future, we like to make predictions. And we want those predictions to be right. It's difficult for us to consider those alternatives. But a better way to address this sort of issue is to really ask the question, how could this be done differently? So if you're doing something already, maybe you've got a training or a keynote speech or something else, is to say, well, okay, I know this works, but what could be done differently? How can I experiment with this? And what kind of what would I find out? And try to be agnostic about the outcome. So even if something looks like it's failed or doesn't work, that's actually just a data point that informs your future decisions about the future going forward. And so you can take various steps back. So if you've got something that you're quite confident with, you don't want to mess with it too much, then maybe you just take one step back and saying, okay, what can I tweak? What can I try out next time? But if you've got something, you want to try something a bit more ambitious, then you can take several steps back and say, how can I approach this issue in a completely different way?
Yeah.
Maybe I've got 45 minutes here, and maybe I could do a keynote speech, but maybe I could do something completely different. What do I want to achieve? What do I want to get the audience to do, think, feel, or do? And maybe I don't do a keynote speech at all. Maybe it's something completely different. How could I do something completely different? So then you can take various steps back.
Okay.
So you consider what kind of experiment you want to engage in.
Well, it's fun too, like imagining different scenarios and then experimenting with what you want to achieve. It's a really exciting way to live. It's really like a lifestyle to live like a futurist, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you can really, that's how you get creative. The futurist, the mindset of the futurist really is one about awareness, imagination, and creativity. And it's about, accepting the fact the world will change, the environment, the things outside of our control will change, but also we can influence what happens as well through our creativity, our imagination, and our experimentation.
So I went 9 years ago to India to find the best astrologists because I wanted to know my future. And once they told me my future, I was like, this is fabulous. It was really great and optimistic and wonderful. I was going to have 2 kids. I was going to marry a guy with a mole on his left side who was into helping people. I was going to live forever unless drowning my kidneys or my liver got me first. And then I walked out and I saw this Indian woman smiling her head off. And I said, oh, you also got a good future. She goes, oh, no, dear, but at least I know.
Right.
And I thought that was so funny how a Western person would like cry. And she was like, because they believe in karma. And they believe like some things are just destiny. And I thought it's so interesting what your culture has to do with like what you think comes your way and how much role you have in changing destiny. So these are really fascinating, big philosophical topics on the mindset and the philosophy of how you live your life, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, fortune telling is a very interesting topic. I lived in China for many years and in Taiwan. I mean, in Taiwan in particular, they're really big into their fortune tellers there. And I wrote some articles when I was a journalist. And it's interesting. There's a lot of there's art and science around the fortune telling. But what's really interesting is indeed the customers. Sometimes they don't really want to know the future. They just want someone to tell them that everything's going to be okay.
Oh, that's nice.
And so they go shopping around until they can find someone who tells them actually everything is going to be okay.
So don't we all just need to know it's going to be okay? And then we just do our best every day when options are thrown at us and tough things are thrown at us, and we just say, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And then it's going to be okay. Or you die and you just try again, if that's your belief over there, right?
That's right.
Okay. I love this. This is interesting. This is really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the future is bright, and maybe one day our future we shall meet. If I'm over in the rainy northern part of our great continent, and maybe no GSS, no global speaking for you this year.
I don't think I'm going to be able to make it this year, but it's great that you introduced me to it. And it's something I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on in future years, for sure.
Because all of our colleagues that are watching come from the Professional Speaking Association of the UK, where I'm a member, you're a member, and everyone I invited was our common colleagues. So we will definitely meet each other at a party one day.
For sure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Graham, for your time.
Thanks for inviting me, Jessica.
Bye.
Bye.